So I will be showing you guys the basics of how to get Playmaker to do some simple behaviors like triggers and labels. So I have my maze level here that I've been kind of working on. It's kind of crazy, I don't know. And this level it's good for not having anything that uses triggers or anything like that, but I'm going to come back to it. So go into Unity, and I want you guys to make a new scene. And it should ask you to save your existing scene. You should do that if you haven't. And in Unity, scenes are just levels. Like in UDK or Unreal 4, you make different levels. And so it's the same thing in Unity. You make different scenes. The only difference in Unity is that they also have the concept of projects. So you kind of want to make one project for every new game that you want to make, and a new scene for every level within that game you want to make. For us, in this case, I'm going to reuse the same project and just make a new scene for it anyway. So if you have Playmaker downloaded, like for me, I have it downloaded here. I have all my old versions of Playmaker as well. You can right-click and do Import Package, and you want to import a custom package to get Playmaker installed into your project. So if you do Import Package, Custom, go to the directory that Playmaker was downloaded to and select the Playmaker package. So I'm going to select my latest version, which is 1772. So find where Playmaker is and hit open on that. And if you don't have Playmaker, let me know. I'll give you time to download it or whatever you need.
I don't have 7.2.
Yeah, so this is the version that I was sharing like a year ago for people. This is a version I'll give you if you haven't bought it yet. You don't really need the newest versions, but I recommend you do these because these have a lot of usability features that make it a lot better. So grab the Playmaker package and click on it to import it. It'll give you this dialog of all the different things that Playmaker comes with. And just hit import, and then it'll work and start compiling. And you will, if it's done right, you will have a Playmaker toolbar at the top that includes all these different new menu options. So as soon as you guys all have a Playmaker Editor in the top, let me know, because I won't continue without it. It looks like you guys are still importing. How you guys doing over there? You guys all ready? Set up? Where do you install the Unity plugin? Hang on, I'll be right back. Make a new scene. Don't do it like that, yeah. Go to Unity, make a new scene. So new scene, and then right-click here and import package this way. So import package. Import package, custom package, and then point to the Playmaker download. Back up. Once it decompresses it, import everything. Okay, we kind of all have to start somewhere. I guarantee you, everything has humble beginnings, but eventually you will become masters of Playmaker. And things are going to go a little slow at first. We're not going to do anything crazy exciting, but we will be turning on and off lights with buttons, which is not the most intense kind of training you can do, but we are going to do it anyway. So, in the new scene, I need to kind of explain first what Playmaker does for us. And I might have mentioned it before, but so Playmaker is it's a visual scripting plugin. And up until like recently, everything you ever want to do from can do with just visual scripting. And it does this by giving you guys the ability to do any kind of scripted behavior you want by mostly just clicking and dragging and editing a bunch of properties. It's very similar to kind of the Unity flow. Playmaker is built around the concept of something called a state machine. So I'm going to explain to you what exactly that is because not everyone's going to know. It's kind of, you don't really have to understand all the details of it, but I'm going to go over like the basics of a state machine. So first of all, let's talk about like the word state itself, okay? Like, you think about the word state in a common concept, and you may wonder how that applies to gaming. Well, if you take like a regular old light switch, let's just use the light switch that's in this room, right? A light switch has two different states it can be in at any time, right? A light switch over there can either be on or off, right? That's the only two things it can do. The lights can either be on or the lights can be off. Those are two different states. A state kind of describes the behaviors that light switch is currently exhibiting, okay? So like a light switch is on, it means that it's currently set to the on state, and you flick it down, and now the light switch is off. There's basically two things. It's just a really convenient way to describe how an object can be used or can be present. Like a monitor, for instance, also has two states. It can either be on or off. I guess it could have a third state for suspend. That's another example of something. Everything like kind of around you has multiple states to it. Like the projector can be on or off. Very simple things can be on or off. However, you take all these various states, and in order to make some kind of good use out of them, you have to combine them with what's called a state machine. A state machine is just basically how to transition from one state to another, okay? So you take a light switch, it has two states, on and off. How do you transition from the light switch that's on? How do you take it to go off? Like, what do you do to that light switch to turn it on and off? Like, you flick the light switch, right? You turn it. So an example is that the light switch is currently off right now, right? So I need to like make this. A light switch being off, there's only one possible thing that can light switch, right? When it's off right now, I can leave it alone, but the only other thing I can do to that light switch is turn it on, right? If the light switch is off right now, I can turn it on, and the light switch is on, I can turn it off. Just need to like visualize. I'm going to be like a little bit. Yeah, I'm going to use a little contracted example. Right? So there's two states for this light switch, off and on. What did I do to transition from off to on? I flipped the switch, right? And I did it again. So the things that a light switch can do between the two states is what a state machine is. So for example, I can turn it on. I can't turn it on again, which is the key. So I have this light switch, it's already on. The only thing I can do is turn this light switch off. Okay? So light switch has on and off states. Now, a state machine is just a bunch of these states connected together with transitions that explain how to go from one state to another. So a light switch has on and off, and I go from on and off to off by flicking the switch. That is my transition. So in Playmaker, we're going to make a light switch that basically is exactly what that light switch over there is doing by using the state machine. The first thing that Playmaker kind of asks you to do is think about the various states that something can be in. You can, like for our light switch, you can either be on or off, and we have to tell it how to go from one state to another. It's going to become a little bit easier to follow when I actually go through and make it with you guys. So let's just start off by making what is an approximation of a light and a level. So go into your level and just make a cube. And make sure it's placed in an area that kind of makes sense. Just put a cube anywhere. We need this cube to kind of be dark. Make sure you can see it in front of the camera. And then I want you to just add a single point light to the cube. The easiest way to get the cube in front of the camera is just to reset it so it's at 0, 0, 0, and then move the camera so it's at 0, 0, 0, and then pull it back. It's like the most straightforward way you can do this. Too. It'll be easy if you reset your camera. So click on your camera object. Here. And then pull it back by using a blue widget. There you go. So there's your cube. So add a point light as well. So go under Game Object and add a point light under Create Other. And make sure move it to be close to the cube. So put it so that at some point it lights up the cube. Yeah, just reset this guy to be at 0, 0, 0 as well. A trick is that go to the cog, the little thing next to the help book, and do reset position. And then you can move it. So it's right on the camera right now, so pull it so it's closer to the cube. Cool. Okay, and then I'm just going to make my light red. I'll just make it really clear that I'm turning it on and off. What's that? The cube is just a way for us to tell. It's just something to light up. It's not necessarily the switch or not. We're going to actually make buttons for the switch. The cube, if the cube wasn't there, you can't tell that the light is there. The cube is just there as something to light up. Yes. And to give you guys a chance to ask questions about this too. Okay, do you guys all, I see lights on most of your guys' things? Okay, just to confirm that your light works, you can turn it on and off by clicking the checkbox on the light. So you can click on the point light and enable it and disable it, and that should make your cube dark and make it sure it's lit up correctly. So click the checkbox on the light and see how your cube goes dark. Okay, so we're going to do essentially the same thing, but we're going to control it through Playmaker and the use of buttons in Playmaker that Playmaker gives us. Okay, so we have a light, we have a cube, or more than one cube if you want. We are going to add some behavior to this light so that we can control whether it's on or off through the usage of buttons in Playmaker. So click on your point light. So make sure you have your point light selected. This is important. So don't select your cubes. Click on your point light. And I want you to go under the Add Component button on the bottom right. And go to the Playmaker category. You got this? Playmaker category, and add a Playmaker FSM. Okay, you'll see a new component that gets added, Playmaker FSM script. Click the Edit button to the right of the FSM text here, and it'll open up the Playmaker Editor window. This welcome dialog you can close, but it has a bunch of video tutorials on it, which link back to the video tutorials I asked you guys to watch a couple weeks ago to help you get started with this. But I just closed that window. All right, so behind that window is your Playmaker Editor. And this is your first view into the finite state machine that is used by the light. So this is the light state machine. It has one state in it. The name of this state is called state 1. It's just a generic name. It doesn't do anything yet. This state 1, when I click on it, shows me that, oh, I can show that this is the name of it. I can rename this thing to whatever I want. Notice that if I click and move this thing around, there's a little start box that goes around with it. This tells me that state 1 is the very, very first thing that this light will go and do. Okay? So the very, very first thing that this light's going to do is listed under this blank area called the action list under the state view. So it's empty right now. You actually have nothing in here. But I want to show you that we are going to add some more states. So I actually want you to add, we're going to add 2 states to start. This state I'm going to name light is on. So I'm just going to rename that to make it more clear what the state is actually representing. It means that when I'm in this state, the light is going to be on. Okay? Right-click and add a new state somewhere in the other area of this canvas. You can also control-click to automatically add states if you want. They'll automatically add states with nothing in them. That's just a shortcut. For now, you only need 2 states. Light is on, and this one, if you can guess, is going to be called light is off. Just like I said, the light switch over there on the wall has 2 states. We've made 2 states for our point light. Okay? So let's start adding some behavior to really make this an actual state machine. So I'm going to click on the light is on state because it's the first thing that's going to happen. And what I want my Playmaker component to do is when I click a button, it's going to turn the light off. So let's just make that behavior work first. The first thing I want to show you is that Playmaker has support for showing interactable buttons really easily. So go over here to the action browser with that first state selected and click the action browser button. And you're going to see a new dialog pop up with a bunch of categories here and a bunch of actions. I want you guys to notice that there's like many, many categories. You don't really need to browse this category list ever. I'm only ever going to use the search box at the top because that's the easiest way to do it. I want you to search for button in the search dialog box at the top. It'll filter the list of actions that you can use to have anything that has the name button in it. Okay, you should see one called GUI button here. So I want you to either click and drag this onto the action browser or double-click this action here. So you can either double-click it or drag it over here. And as soon as you do that, you'll see that your action bar in your state view has a new action in it. Make sure that you either double-click on it or when you actually click and drag, you want to click and drag it onto the blank area here. So notice here, you actually want to click and drag the GUI button, the very, very first one, that one, onto, wait, so cancel that, so just let go. I want you to delete those things. You can delete that, Click on the first state there. This thing is empty, it does nothing right now. So go over there to the action browser and you can click and drag that over here. Okay, so with that action added, look in your game view. When I add this action, my game view in the background is now darker. It's a darker blue. It's hard to tell. But an easy way to do that is to change this text here on this action to say turn light off. And as you type the text here, it should update in your game view the text for this button. Right now, the button is the full width and height of the screen. So we're going to change that as well right now. So go to the width and height property, which are currently set to 1. These are normalized values, which are the width and height of the screen. I want you to scroll down and find the width and height and change these to something more like 0.2 and 0.2, which will make your button something a little bit smaller. And you should see the button in your game view shrink based on that, the numbers that you type in there. Okay? Everyone have that so far? A button here. If you play the game right now with doing nothing else, so click the play button. You can click this button here. It's actually an interactable button, even though it doesn't do anything. But just make sure that that button is actually working as intended. We're going to have this button change the light so that it turns off. Okay? So I just want to take a minute here to describe what we actually just did. we have two states in our light, right? We have the light is on state. I'm going to change the color of this to be blue. And the light is off state, which is red. When I click the light is on state, I get a list of everything the state does. So for example, if I ever wanted it to do something like, let's just say I add a bunch of just random actions here. Everything that happens in this state when I'm inside of it is listed here in its actions list. It will execute each one of these actions from top to bottom as soon as it enters this state. So in my case, it will do the GUI button, try to do a curve color, and then do some animate floats and animate rectangles. What these things do right now is not important. Just realize that you can add an unlimited number of actions to every state. So you can add as many actions as you need or want to every state. For us right now, we only have one action here. We have a button action, which is responsible for doing this. We can disable this action, which essentially hides that button. It makes it so the state doesn't do anything. I could duplicate this action, so I could have multiples of these if I wanted to. And for every action I add, it adds more buttons, right? Just to prove that it works. Don't worry about duplicating it for now. Just know that this is the list of all the actions. Okay? Any questions so far? Okay. So right now, when we click this button, nothing happens. What we actually want to do is when you click the button, we want to go from the light is on state, from this blue state to this red state. So how do we set that up? How do we actually set it up so that this button transfers us from this blue state to the red state? If I hit play, for instance, notice that I keep this Playmaker Editor in view, and there's a green box. That green box around the state tells me what the current state I'm in is. And I want it to be this state, the light is off instead. I want me to click this button and transition. Okay? So let's set that up right now. In Playmaker, in order for you to create a link from one state to another, you have to tell Playmaker how you get from one state to another. So one of the first requirements for that is that you need to make an event that tells Playmaker, hey, something important happened in my state machine. In our case, the thing that's important is that the user, the player, clicked the button. So I want to tell Playmaker that someone clicked the button. And conveniently, Playmaker already has something in there that's listened for called an event. So on the top here, right now we're in the State tab. I want you to click the Events tab instead, right next to the State tab. Now, the Events tab here at the top is going to be a list of all the things that you want Playmaker to be listening for, all the important events. In our case here, I want to add an event that says, hey, I clicked the button. This is a thing that happened in your game, okay? Keep that in mind. These are things that happen in your game. All right, so click the button. Player walked into the trigger. Player took damage. I picked up a weapon. These are things that happen in your game. So I want you to add an event. You type in the name of it. Once you've added an event, I want you to right-click on your state here. So right now you have your state, which might be blue or not. And what you're going to do is you're going to tell Playmaker, hey, dude, when this specific event happens, I want to be able to change states. So I'm going to add a transition here. So you're going to tell Playmaker, I want a transition to occur when someone clicks the button. So I want you to add that transition here. You're going to see that right below the state name, it's added a new, essentially, row to this state machine. It says click the button. This is a transition event. When I click on this event, the bottom part of this state, and I click and drag, I get an arrow that I can move around, okay? This thing is sticky, and it kind of attaches to other states. And as you can guess, when the person clicks the button, I want it to go to the new light is off state. So I want you to connect this transition to the other state that you have in your state machine. Okay? Now, you've told Playmaker that when someone clicks the button that you want to transition, the key is that the button itself has to be told which event you care about. So here in the button action, there's a drop-down box for which event you want to send when they click on it. In this case, I'm just going to send the click the button event. So I want you to click on this, which is currently a blank drop-down box, and select the click the button event that you chose. Okay? Now I want you to play your game. Keep Playmaker open so you can see, and then click the button. You should have seen the transition occur to go from the blue state to the red state, and notice that you no longer have a button. Okay? Why do you no longer have a button? Why is there no button anymore showing up? Right. Only the first state has button action in it, remember? We didn't add anything. You can actually see it. You can click on this state. Oh, this state has a button. This state doesn't have a button. Okay? Cool. So we want to set it up so that it doesn't just transition states. Right now, we got it set up so you click the button, and watch the Playmaker window here. It's going to actually show you how it transitions from one to another. Notice the blue state is green right now. I click the button. The link turns green for a second, and now there's a new outline around my state. Okay? That's all well and good, but what we want to do now is when I go into this state, I actually want to turn the light off. Okay? So I'm going to add one more action. Go to your action browser again, select your red state. So make sure you're not playing the game. This is another key. Make sure you've stopped playing the game. Otherwise, everything you're doing is going to be lost. Click on this new state. Go to the action browser. And I want you to search for light intensity, 2 words. You should see a set light intensity action. So go ahead and add that to your state. You can either click and drag that in, or you can double click on the action, and that will also add it to your state. Okay? In this case, there's an action that's asking, hey, I'm going to set the light intensity of some game object. In this case, it defaults to using the owner of this component. Who's the owner of this Playmaker component? We added it to the point light, right? So the point light is the owner, which is perfect because that's what we want to set the light intensity of. We're going to crank the light intensity down to 0 instead of setting it to 1. Okay? So set that to 0. Now play your game and click your button, and notice that your light will turn off. Okay? Does everyone have a light turning off? Here. Simple stuff. I didn't lose anyone yet. Okay. Cool. So you guys notice that you are in that state. As soon as you enter that state, the light turned off. Cool. Okay. Why don't we add one more iteration onto this? Let's add a button that turns the light back on. Because right now, this is a one-way light switch. You can only ever turn it off, which is not super useful. This is okay, so I just want to take a moment here. We're going over how to turn it on and off a light with a button, but this is totally like applicable to all kinds of game elements, right? If you want to like buy an item with a button, right? Or you want to say open a chest or talk to an NPC, anything you want to do with like buttons that cause something else to happen, maybe you click a button and you want to like play a particle effect or play a sound. All these things are built the same way. You have states for these things that change when you click buttons. So even though we're working with lights here, don't think of this as just like a light thing. Think of this as a way to use states for your games. All right? So here we go. As I've shown you, when you click the button, you go to this state. And notice there's no more button up here. So we're going to fix that problem right now. We're going to add another button in this state that lets us turn the light on again. Okay? So go back to Playmaker and go to the action browser and type button again in your filter box. And I want you to add a GUI button to the new light is off state. Okay? Just like what you did before. All right, so I'm in this state. Now this state has two things that it does. One, it sets the light intensity, and another is going to show a button, okay? This button text, I want you to change to say turn light on, okay? And just like the other button, I kind of want you to change the width and the height, because right now it's a full screen button. I'm going to change the width to be 0.2 and the height to be 0.2. I'm going to have it exactly match the size of the other button. Okay, so if you play right now with that button that you've added, and you click this, turn the light off. So with nothing else done, just play your game and make sure that when you turn the light off, that you still get a button that shows up, okay? Cool. And that button doesn't do anything yet. We haven't done that step, so let's add that next. So when the light is off, I want you to tell Playmaker, hey dude, someone clicked the button, go ahead and go back to the old state you're at, okay? So the first thing that I want you to do is add a transition for this state. When this state is activated, right-click on it and add a transition for click the button. This is us telling Playmaker, hey, I have something important. I want you to change states when someone clicks the button. And just like you did for the other state, I want you to click and drag the arrow off of here and connect it to the on, light is on state. Okay? And then finally, in the light is off state, we need to assign the event that gets sent when you click the button. Okay? So this thing, which is a blank drop-down box right now, I want you to change it so that it says click the button instead. The event that you send when you click the button should be this one here. Okay? So we're missing one step, but I want you to play it right now anyway, because I want you to show you. Keep the Playmaker Editor open. Click the button. Notice that it changes to the red one. Every time you click the button, notice that it cycles between the two states. Okay? Playmaker is now switching between the two states here. So what's the only thing we're missing now? Turn the lighting back on, right? Okay. So we're going to go to the first state again. The light is on state. Make sure you're not running. Go to the action browser. Search for light intensity. And add that action to your state. And you should make it set the light intensity to 1, and that's it. So play your game. And now you have a state machine that turns the light on and off. So what is a state machine again? A state machine is a collection of states and how you transition from one state to another. So we've just made our first state machine, which is a light that turns on and off when you click a button. This could be a light that turns on and off when you walk into an area, when you pick up an item, when you're holding a torch that runs out of time. All those things are considered state machines, okay? This is the simplest state machine that you can make. This is exactly straight out of like the video tutorial. Anyone have any questions on this? Like, what is a state machine, or what is a state, and what are transitions? Any questions? When we explain anything? Because like this is not exactly the most straightforward. Okay, for you VGP guys, you should be kind of more familiar with it, but at the same time, it's actually not a concept that's used a lot that I've noticed guys around here using in programming state machines. It's a really powerful concept you can use in your games, but Playmaker is nice in that it visualizes it for you, which is kind of cool. So I think you can, I use this a lot too. Like AI is very common for this. Like AI uses state machines a lot. So, all right, let's do something a little bit more interesting, which is what you're going to need to do for your homework. Let's set up a trigger, which is like the most common gameplay feature you could ever use. It's like the most often used thing in like any game. It. triggers are used for triggering off enemy spawn waves, cinematics, kill volumes, capturing territory, picking up items, hitting enemies with bullets. All those things are triggers. All those things are events that happen when people run into box-shaped things. Or in our case, we could use spheres as well. So we're going to make another Playmaker state machine using triggers. So I'm going to have you guys make a brand new scene again. Let's just start with a brand new scene. So go to the file and make new scene. And this will be the last thing that I do today, and then I'll let you guys go. So make a new scene, and I want you to make a plane and put a first-person controller in there, because we're going to need that for our trigger. So in your new scene, I want you to add a plane, so create a plane in your level. Make sure it's at 0, 0, 0. It'll only make your life easier. So go under Game Object, Create Other, and then do Plane. And make sure, I would just reset the position here on the transform to be 0, 0, 0. It'll make your life a lot easier. Add a light. So go under here and add a directional light. You're going to need to see. And then you should still have your character controller, so drag a first-person controller into your level as well. Make sure you lift him up so he's not falling through. And just play and make sure you can walk around your level and that you have a controller. Cool. I'm going to scale up my plane so I don't fall off so easily. Okay. So let's make a trigger that when the trigger is on, when someone walks into it, all I want you to do is show text on screen. That's it. We're going to use this trigger in our maze to determine victory conditions so that when the player walks into it, you can tell them that they won. And we're going to do a little fade to black as well, because why not? Okay? So here's my first-person controller. I want you guys to make a cube in your level. It doesn't really matter what the shape of this cube is, but we're going to use this cube as a basis for what our trigger looks like. Kind of just put it in front of the player. Let's do one more thing. Let's just make it easier to tell where that trigger is. I would just bury this cube kind of halfway into the level. And I'm just going to drag like a color material onto it. I want to just know that there's a trigger here. So that's going to be the thing that we're going to step up on. However, that's not the actual trigger. All that is just a different colored area because my whole level is white. So I want to know where this thing is, okay? So I want you to make another cube. Or you can duplicate this cube if you want, which is probably easier. Just Control D and duplicate it. I want you to raise it up so that it's right above the other object that you created. And I want you to do two things to this object. I want you to make sure that it covers the base of the platform here. So notice that my platform is kind of that size, and the trigger volume is going to be at least that size. And so make sure you scale it up if you can. Okay. So with your new cube that's above the other cube, I want you to do two things. One, disable the mesh renderer. So uncheck this checkbox, which will hide the mesh. So disable the mesh renderer here. And then go to the box collider properties and check the is trigger checkbox. This one is critical because without this checked, you'll actually just run up against it. You won't be able to walk through it. Make sure that is trigger is checked to true because now you can walk through it, but it'll still generate events for you. Okay? Click on this checkbox here. At At the same time, naming conventions are super important. Like, I can't stress how hard it is to learn how to follow naming conventions, even in your own little work, okay? Keeping everything named cube is not going to help you later, all right? I think you know this, Kelvin, very well, right? So here's a naming convention I like to use. You guys are welcome to use it or not. I like to label anything that's a game object that is gameplay related. Label it GO underscore for a game object, and then a name describing what it is. So here, I'm going to go GO underscore trigger, which is going to represent the trigger box, okay? This is a game object that actually has gameplay associated with it, okay? So click on your trigger object, and we're going to add a new component to it, which you can guess is going to be a Playmaker component. So go to Add Component, go to Playmaker, and add a new Playmaker FSM, okay? Now click the Edit button on the Playmaker FSM again. It should be right to the right of the name of the FSM. And again, you get this default state machine. Okay? Cool. All right, so this default state machine has a 1 state. We're going to make 2 states total, just like the light switch. Okay? This first state, I want you to say waiting for player. Okay? That's what I want you to name the first one. This is the default state. It means that this trigger volume is doing nothing but waiting for the player to walk into it. Okay? I want you to make another new state. You can either control-click to add a state or right-click. Just add a new state either way, either right-clicking or control-clicking. And I want you to label this one player touched me. Player touched me. You can label this whatever you want. Show me where the player touched you. Show me on the doll. Okay, you can't go longer than that. Player touched me. All right? No. It's fine. Everything's fine. Just go with the flow, man. It's good. All right, so waiting for player. We're going to add one action to this. There's an action that is specifically related to triggers. So go to the action browser, just like we did for the light switch. I'm going to just color this one. Something neat. I don't know. Go to the action browser, and I want you to look for trigger. There's only 2 actions that are related to triggers. The one you care about is the trigger event. So I want you to add that to your action browser, or add that to your action list. So this action will basically be waiting. And just like how the button sent an event when you clicked on it, this will send an event when someone walks into it, or anything really walks into it. In our case, it'll be the player, but it could be projectiles or anything. So remember, the button had an event that got sent when you clicked on it. This one, we're going to send an event when someone walks into it, okay? So go to the Events tab in your state machine editor. We're going to add a new thing that happened, okay? Just like how I said, click the button is an event. Player picked up inventory in his event. What is a good name for this when the player walks into the trigger? We're going to call it, yeah, player walked in. I like to be as descriptive as possible for these events. It's going to make it really easy to tell what these things do later. So hit enter, make sure you've added that event. It should show up in this list with a little checkbox next to it. So go back to the state. Okay. Remember, the button had a transition that occurred when someone clicked it. So just like the button, we're going to add a transition. While we're waiting for a player, if a player walks into us, I want to change the state from waiting from player to the player touch me. Okay? So right-click on this state. We're going to say, hey, when the player walks into me, I'm going to have a new transition that occurred. So click and drag and connect the arrow from one to another. Okay? And then just like the button, we need to choose what event actually gets fired when the player walks in. So go to the waiting for player state, click on that. So click on the waiting for player state. And then in the send event drop-down box where it's blank currently, I want you to pick the player walked in event that you created. Okay? So now, with that in mind, play your game. Keep this window open so you can see what the Playmaker is doing in the background. And just walk your player over the trigger. You should see that the state transition from waiting for player to player touch me, right? Did everyone get that transition event to occur? If you didn't get that transition event to occur, it's almost always because your state didn't choose the event to send correctly. So make sure this is set to be player walked in, and then make sure you have a transition for that.
You can have specific tags too?
Yep. Which is what we're going to do next week when we do weapons and bullets and stuff. You want like bullets to, I can't see you. You want bullets to only collide with like enemies, so you can set up triggers that only respond to certain tags. So that's how you filter it out, basically. Okay, if everyone has that, then the only other remaining thing that you guys need to know for your homework is when you've touched this state, when you are in this state, I want you to show text, and let's just do a fade out. So let's add the camera fade out first when you enter this state. So click on this state, go to the action browser. I want you to search for fade out, and just add that action to your action browser. Okay, and then play again, and walk into your trigger. And your camera should fade to black. Okay? Now, it won't recover from there. There's no way to get out of that state. For those of you guys that want to get ahead, you can add transitions out of there for some. But this is basically going to be the victory condition for us. Notice that, yeah, you can still move the player, obviously. But we're not going to worry about that. It's just basically a way to hide it. You on this state here, the waiting for player, you have a little exclamation mark that looks like that. You shouldn't have anything on there except for this. Does it look like that? Camera fade out. Do you have something like that? It should make sure you don't have any transitions set up here. It should just be the state. So if you have any transitions here, like these, just delete them. Okay. So show me what happens. Mm-hmm. Make sure that thing is, your collide tag, don't set it to player. The player is actually not tagged as player, which is an oddity in Unity. So go to that trigger thing and just set it to be untagged. We're going to work with tags later with bullets and stuff. For now, you don't really need to distinguish the player from other things. Untagged. Make sure, click on your player for me. He's tagged as main camera for some reason. In top right. So untag him. Yeah, and then play again. Probably why. Does everyone have a trigger working and the fade to black? Who doesn't have it working? You guys good down there? Yeah. Let me come down for a second, and then let me come and help you tag. For those of you guys that want to try adding a button in that state to you, because okay, cool. So I think you get the same problem. Right now it's looking for untagged only. So click on your player to see if this is untagged. It's untagged as well. So go to the trigger buckets again. Make sure. See, it said the box collider. You want to enable the box collider, but still is looking for something. So you just want to disable it. show you two things with labels. Before, I didn't really show people how to do this until it was really late, and all the games had really crappy text. I'm going to show you right now how to control like font sizes and fonts in Unity. And unfortunately, it's a pain in the ass. It's not really straightforward, but I'm going to show it to you anyway so that you know how to do it, because everyone just struggles with this like later on. It's not really that hard. It's just like not intuitive. It's not like, oh, I'll just change the font size. There's no such thing. You have to do skins. So, okay, so we have a camera fade out. Let's just add a label here on top of it. So I want you to go to the player touch me state and look for GUI label, 2 words. So we're going to add a label. So add that action. And I'm going to have the text say something like, you win. Lame, whatever. We'll get into more fancy text manipulation to be able to show more varied things like experience and health and all that stuff later. For now, just do some text. You should see it show up in your game view right now in the top left corner of the screen. Okay. If you play the game now, you should also confirm that that text only shows up when you step over the trigger. So you should see it like in the upper left, and it's kind of small and tinny and uses crappy font. So let's first, okay, so that by itself is pretty much all you need for like the homework for this setup. But let me show you a little bit more of that. So Unity, as you can see, doesn't really have an option here in the GUI label action to control much. It has like the position of this thing, so you can move it left and right. It has like a tooltip, which is totally not useful for a game. And then it has a style, which is also not really that useful. So Unity has this concept of skinning UI and letting you create skins just like you create materials. So in order to customize the font size and the font itself and color and all that stuff, you need to be able to create a skin for your GUI. And a skin is just like a material is for meshes. Okay? So go to your project view and go under create, and I want you all to create a GUI skin. Okay? Should be near the bottom. Name this thing something like default, let's just say. Okay? Default has a bunch of properties here. This skin is basically like a global settings for all UI in your game. This will apply to any buttons or labels. That's why it shows everything that we care about here. But here's where you change the font. So if I had a font, let's say I go to, if you've never used DA font, it's good. I'll just download like this one here. Seems good. Caution. Expand that, copy it, and then paste it to my desktop. I'll also just put it into my asset directory. I'm going to just grab this this font. So I'll have this font here. So I have this caution, so I can use that as my font. So if nothing else, I hope that actually works. I've never used that font before. It may just like blow up on me. Yeah, it didn't like that. Oh, I didn't actually set it. So choose a font, find a font that you want. I use DA font. Or if you don't want to really mess with a font right now, that's fine. Let's just set up something that makes it really obvious. So go into the label properties here, because what we're drawing is a label. And go under font size and crank this guy up to like 50. Okay. That by itself is not enough. You have to tell Unity to use your skin when you're in this state. Okay? So that's one more action I need you guys to add. Okay? So go to your player touch me state. You set it to 50 or like 60. Oh, if you go to your default GUI skin, go into the label here, and then scroll down. There's a font size here. And you can align it to be middle center or whatever. You can control all the padding and what it looks like. So once you've added that and you've kind of set the font size, go ahead and set the font size to be something like 50 here. Okay. We need to tell Unity to use your skin, otherwise it won't know to use it. So go back to your trigger object. So click on your trigger and go to Playmaker and click on the player touched me state. And I want you to go to the action browser while you have that state selected. So click on the action browser, bring this guy up. And I want you to search for skin. Okay. So I want you to drag this guy. Make sure he's the very first action in your list. Okay. So drag him and put him at the top of your action list. And here is where you would assign the skin. Okay. When you're working with Playmaker or anything in Unity, there are two ways to assign values to things. It's asking for a skin here. I've assigned none to it right now. There's two different ways. One way is to click the little circle to the right. Okay? This will present you with a list of all the assets that match that property. Okay? You can click on the little circle. Or, if you don't want to click the circle, you can drag your asset from your project folder and you can put it into the field here. So I don't really care which way you do it. Just assign the default skin here either way. Now, when you play, with that action, where's my font that I downloaded? You win. In size 50. I guess that's 50. I could probably crank it up way more. Let's just make this like 200. If you want it to be like centered, you could do that too. Pick a folder, put it in like a folder. Oh, is it in a zip file? You have to take it out of the zip file first. So just copy it. So copy it, so right click and do copy. And then click on downloads and paste it here. And then click and drag that into here. And then you don't, yeah, you can just override that thing with that font. So yeah, drag that APA and drag it over Arial. And then make sure that works. If you've already set your GUI skin. Did you override your GUI skin already?
Yeah, because it's weird because that's in the game.
Yeah, so this is how you customize labels. This is also how you customize buttons, okay? If you have any custom button art or you want to change the style of buttons, this is how you do it with GUI skins, okay? You can't do it another way as far as I know. Like this is kind of confusing. It's kind of sucky because you kind of have to do this all the time, but at least you can customize your text to say whatever you want. Okay, questions? Triggers.
I'm assuming you always put it on top because of order of operation, right? It goes from top to bottom.
Yes, you want to have the skin set before you draw the label. Exactly right. All right, so we went over a light switch and a trigger. Next week, we're going to go over variables, changing colors of things, some animation stuff, and making a third-person controller. So I want to give you guys the homework. This is your first graded homework. I'll put this on Zoo. Or maybe I'll just put this in a folder. Classwork. Okay, so it's basically the maze that you guys are working on already. But the key is that I need you guys to set up a trigger that shows a label that says you win when you reach the exit. So exactly what you guys just made, I want you to put this into your maze, essentially. I want you to finish your maze. The only requirements that I really have for it are that your maze is playable, that you actually have a way to win it. I recommend, if you haven't already, do the prototype of the level on paper, or lay out the level and iterate on it that way. You can go as crazy as you want. This is more an exercise on combining Playmaker into your workflow, so you guys get comfortable with it. And that's it. So that's the homework for this week. Any questions?
Saving and transporting our Unity files, you just copy over the Unity and the package, right?
Oh, that's a good question, actually. So yeah, as I mentioned, Unity works in folders. So all you have to do to copy your Unity folder around, or your project, is just copy your folder around. It'll migrate everything.
I like to send it to a zip file.
Yeah, you can put it in a zip file too, because it compresses pretty nicely. Just be careful. I want to say, like, I've had issues with it, like renaming. Like, renaming will sometimes work, but like it has some problems when you start working with scripts. So like, try to hesitate away like from renaming this outside here if you're working with scripts. I don't know. You can do it, but I just have had to do some manual work. For the most part, just copy these folders around, and it'll save you. And then next week, I'm going to go over Perforce as well. I'm going to show you guys how to connect to Perforce and check in your game. And we'll be doing a race-style game, like a foot race, Mirror's Edge style game next week. All right, so pretty basic stuff today. Any questions on triggers and lights, switches, and stuff? First introductions. Any other questions about Playmaker in general? Yes, which we won't need in this class really, but it can't do arrays. Yeah, so it can't do lists of things, which is kind of crazy that it can't do it, but oddly enough, you can make almost any game without it anyway, because Unity is kind of built around the idea that you don't need arrays, you just do everything in prefabs.
Would you prefer us to do everything on Playmaker, or can we do some scripting too?
You're welcome to script if you feel like you want to do that. I have no problems with you scripting in Unity as well. As I mentioned, the only thing I ask is that you keep up with the projects, that you kind of meet the requirements for it. If you can mix and match Playmaker in Unity. Like, there's some things that Playmaker does nicer. Here, I want to show you VGP guys something too. In Playmaker, anytime you have an action, like, oh, how do they do the fade out? Well, you can just edit the script of any of these actions, and it opens it up in MonoDevelop and shows you all the code that used to drive that behavior. So if you want to just do a camera fade out, but you don't want to do Playmaker, you just want to like steal that behavior, just add that action and look at it, and you'll notice that, oh, on update, it's just grabbing the time, and then on GUI, it's literally just drawing a texture, the full size of the screen.
Yeah,
That's all it's doing.
Adjusting the gradient.
Adjusting the alpha, yeah, based on the current time, exactly. Yeah, so that's a really nice thing about the Playmaker actions, is that there are like hundreds of actions, right? Like, there's all these things that you can do. And any of these things that you care about, that you want to know how are done in script, I just go ahead and like look at the code for it too. Okay. All right. If there are no questions, it's clear what the homework is. So next week, I'm gonna put it off in Zool, so you guys can just grab it right now. I don't know why I can't access Zool right now. It's kind of weird. Can't get into Zool. Maybe I'll just put it in my faculty folder. Huh. That's really weird. Okay, there we go. I'm going to make a folder, GA3331. Goes to homework in here. Okay. This is the week 3 homework. So come to class. I'm going to show you guys how to check this in next week. You're going to check this into Perforce. And that way you can also check in your homework from home. Like, you can submit it from home. Anywhere that you have access to Perforce, which there's a web client as well you can use. But yeah. Okay. All right, that's it for today. Thank you, everyone. If you have no questions, I'll see you next week. I'm going to stop recording.